there's no change for me in dreaming. I'm aphantasic in dreams. There's no imagery. If I'm being chased by a monster, I know I'm being chased by a monster, and I can feel the physiological, the fear and
Yeah.
all of that, but I don't see the monster or hear it.
It was sort of a surprise to find out, although once I knew, it of course made sense, but it's like you don't even know what you're missing until someone actually points it out to you because it's been your norm the entire time.
In normal everyday life, I have visions and voices and sounds going on in my head. But as soon as I turn my attention to that, whatever it is, there's absolutely nothing there. It goes away.
Hello, and welcome to our first Aphantasia and Aurelia panel that we have. Um, we have really been looking forward to this. We have a lot of people in our community that have neurodiversity, or autism, ADHD, and within that group, we also have a lot of people with aphantasia and Aurelia, and that is what we're going to talk about today. My name is Pernille Lindemore.
I'm Todd Lindemore.
And then we have Dr. Leela with us, and we're going to have Leela doing all the geeky, nerdy stuff and asking all of those questions. And then we have our panel people. And if you guys could introduce yourself. Jason, if you go first.
Okay. My name is Jason Saxon. If I have aphantasia, it's a different form than what I hear from normally. I do have things going on in my head normally, but if somebody asks me to concentrate on something, I have absolutely nothing. I'm a big fan of IFS, internal family systems, but in that treatment, in that therapy, they ask you to concentrate on a part of yourself. And that means nothing to me. That's like asking me to concentrate on my spirit or my soul. Like, what does that even mean? There's absolutely nothing there. But in normal everyday life, I have visions and voices and sounds going on in my head. But as soon as I turn my attention to that, whatever it is, there's absolutely nothing there. It goes away. So a little bit different than straight. I know some people have nothing at all. Mine just is anytime I focus on it, it's gone. Can't bring anything to. So it was really difficult when we first started working together, trying to explore some of the therapeutic things, and I'm just like, what does that mean? And I think that was when you kind of identified like I might have aphantasia. So
yeah. Do you have any other spectrumy stuff going on?
not that I'm aware of. And I'm not even sure that I always have had this. I had some pretty intense PTSD through my years of law enforcement and working through some of those, working with psychedelics and working through this program, or not this program, but this process of awakening as things have, layers have begun to erode away and fall away. There's just empty space, which is so peaceful to have all these years later, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not. I can't say for sure that I used to be able to hold images, work with things, and but I just don't have that anymore.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
And Hannah?
My name is Hannah Payne, and I suppose I have a grab bag of fun. I have both aphantasia and how do you say it? Aurelia?
And Aurelia?
Aurelia.
And Aurelia, yeah.
And I'm also on the ASD spectrum, and with both aphantasia and Aurelia, it was sort of a surprise to find out, although once I knew, it of course made sense, but it's like you don't even know what you're missing until someone actually points it out to you because it's been your norm the entire time. So all this to say, I wouldn't be surprised if there's something else that pops up. I figured out I had aphantasia before I even knew that Aurelia was a thing. So that was another surprise when I learned, oh, people can actually like hear voices and songs and sounds in their head. So I suppose, well, I actually haven't learned much about the science behind it, so we'll hear some of that from Leela. But I suppose for me, it's, I guess, more on the extreme spectrum of having no no visual thoughts. And with sounds, I guess I still don't know what thoughts really are because it's not something I'm hearing or seeing.
Yeah, it's so funny because it is the way that most people discover that they have aphantasia, that they find out that the rest of us are walking around and we can create movies and songs and all of that in our heads. So yeah, thank you so much. And Marcus?
Yeah, I think Hannah and I got dealt the same exact cards. I'm on the autism spectrum. I have aphantasia and anaurelia. They're up until a month ago, I would have said they were total. Absolutely no images. Ask me to see a triangle in my head. I can't do it. Um, or voices. Maybe a little later, I would be interested in getting into some nuance that I've discovered there, but I'll say it's pretty extreme. Um, I also have, I never hear this talked about, but I also have the olfactory and taste versions of these mind blindness. And I very recently discovered that's useful in conversation because a lot of so-called neurotypical people are mind blind to taste and smell. So I've had a couple experiences recently where I've said to people who didn't just couldn't fathom aphantasia, say, well, can you conjure up in your mind the smell of a rose? And I think some people can do that, but a lot of people that I've talked to have discovered they can't do that.
Interesting.
But they still know what a rose, they have that, as aphantasics talk about, they know what a rose smells like. So anyway, if that's helpful to anybody who watches this kind of getting it, um, I
That is
have that too.
such good,
Yeah,
yeah, such good information. Yeah.
yeah.
You
And
you
I
truly just
thought recently,
proved my point of I didn't even know that that was a thing that people
yeah,
could do that with
yeah.
smells
And
and sound.
I wondered on the other end, people who are chefs, and they seem to clearly have the ability in their mind to taste what it would be like to add
Mhm.
this
Yeah.
spice to this, and that's totally unfathomable to me. I can't imagine that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, the my one non-aphantasic, I guess, senses are the body senses, which are very active to me. So I can, in my mind, feel the roughness of sandpaper, um, so on and so forth. Uh,
That's so
That
interesting.
really is.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm on the complete opposite spectrum as an autist, and I have synesthesia. So if it's like, imagining a flavor or a smell of a rose, I can see the rose literally floating right there in front of me, and I can smell it, and it's like, turning around. I'm on the completely different,
Yeah.
making a
Right.
lot of
The
a
full
lot of things up.
spectrum of,
Yeah, like making a lot of things up that is not there. And what you say about tasting something and tasting the difference before I put something in food, it's yeah, absolutely. So I'm on the absolute
Yeah.
opposite spectrum, and also why I won't be asking many questions today because there are so many things that I simply do not understand. It's so opposite of my experience of life.
I
So
thought of just a couple of other things just because I get asked this a lot when I talk about this. Um, there's no change for me in dreaming. I'm aphantasic in dreams. There's no imagery. If I'm being chased by a monster, I know I'm being chased by a monster, and I can feel the physiological, the fear and
yeah.
all of that, but I don't see the monster or hear it. And same with psychedelics. I can look at a pattern on the wall and see it fluctuate and all that, but I don't get visual hallucinate or mind hallucinations. And just because this comes up a lot, I'm a visual artist. There are a lot of people who are aphantasics who are artists, so that's a myth busting kind of thing. So, yeah.
That is
There,
I
amazing.
love that.
Yeah.
there are a lot of myths that I'm going to get to, and I want to talk about the creativity quite a bit because you're right. We always think of imagination as image, intonation, but it has not any correlation. Um, what's interesting about what you say, Marcus, is I just found out there's a guy named Joel Pearson in Australia. He found out that 50% of aphants are five sensory aphants,
Hmm.
meaning they have what you say, taste, smell, they have the full spectrum. Yet most aphants dream in pictures.
Do.
So what aphantasia is, it is the so close your eyes. You if you I say apple, can you what do you see? An aphant sees either a weak or no picture. They don't see it. If you ask a normal person, like I'm going to ask Todd, close your eyes. And I say the word apple, what comes up for you? Do you see a color?
Yeah, yeah. I have a red apple with possibly some tinges of green kind of streaking down the top of
Right.
it.
And
Yeah.
do you see the context of it? Is it on a tree or on a table or?
In its when you just say to see an apple, I actually see a gray screen with an apple superimposed on it. But if you asked me to place it on a table, then it's right there sitting on a brown wooden table, or if you said to have it floating in the space, then it would just appear, sort of in front of me, superimposed over what I imagine or seem to remember the room looking like right in front of me right now.
And if I asked you to reach out and take a bite, do you taste it?
Yeah, I could actually, yeah, my salivary glands actually
Mhm.
spark a little bit, and so I get like some tartness on the tongue, and I can actually feel almost like I'm crunching through. There's almost like the
So you
tactile
hear
sense
it
of
too,
crunching
you hear
through.
the sound. Yeah. And
Yeah.
can you rotate it around? Can you move the apple so you see the front, back, and side of it?
Yes, though it's a little bit. It's interesting because it's like I've tried that before with like a teapot, which I think is more I can do, and it's more obvious like which side is up and all of that. With an apple, I notice it's more jittery. It's almost like I see a static image, and then there's like a different static image. It's not quite as smooth. And it's almost like the mind is like creating different versions of something like an apple that kind of goes from one to the other. But effectively, yeah, I can like see the bottom of it with its little butt. And
Can, can I ask a quick question, Todd? I'm just really
yeah,
curious. Do you
yeah.
think the, put the apple on the table, do you think you always would see the same table unless you were prompted to see some particular kind of table? Like I'm wondering
Super good question.
how stereotyped the
Yeah.
like apple and the table are.
Yeah, it's a super good question. So it's funny because the initial when you just say table, it actually looks like if you ask like an AI rendering of a table, it's like I don't know, brown IKEA kind of like table. Like it's just super, generic. But if you asked to put it on our specifically dining room table, then I can picture that. So I think yeah, yeah. Now that I have the first one in mind, it's like that's the one that's kind of takes priority and is most likely to appear unless you specifically ask me, okay, now on the kitchen table, what does that look like? Okay, I can see that now. And then so maybe if you prompt, I can't say that I've like always seen this same kind of AI looking IKEA table before. But that's a super good question. Yeah, I think a lot of times it's kind of random based on whatever input I've seen recently or whatever's been around it. And that's just kind of it really reminds me a lot of AI, where like, it's prompt, like if you ask an AI picture generator to create an image, it's creating it just kind of randomly based off of all of the input that it's had of what it thinks a table is going to be. And unless you give it more specifics of what color or texture or material the table is made of, it's kind of picking, I guess, whichever is, the most that is weighted, the most towards, and I think is probably very similar to this.
So just to know that I assume most of you guys are number five, you see nothing. There is a spectrum from all the way from aphantasia is not an on-off thing. It's a spectrum, and it goes to hyperphantasia, where it's so vivid. It's like Tesla was supposedly a hyperphant. There are a number of people who just have like almost photographic memory type images. But just to know, there are lots of ways of determining aphantasia. There are questionnaires. There's all sorts of things now. So we don't have to go into all of that, but just to know it is a spectrum. And also, aphantasia is not the absence of images, it's the absence of the voluntary ability to call them up. So, Jason, what you were saying, that images are there. The hypnagogic, or for most people, subconscious images are happening in aphants. They've actually recently discovered that all aphants have visual cortex activation all the time. So, but it's lower down in the hierarchy. It's not connected to the frontal cortex, so it's not a voluntary loop. But they're getting like the thing that we all get, which is this kind of flow of unbeckoned subconscious stuff. And the more tuned you are to it, the more conscious that becomes. So that's really interesting with aphants and art being creative. We'll get to that in a minute, but so the neuroscience is discovering some really interesting stuff. So aphantasia is not the absence of imagery, period. It's the absence of voluntary imagery, which is why most aphants can dream. And they also do see psychedelics images, but not all, as Marcus is illustrating. But what's interesting to me about this whole thing is the way it relates to the Fetters, because the bubble of reality and what we're learning is to deconstruct the belief that we're seeing what's there and not what we're putting there. And so what this is a discussion of and an investigation into is the fact that we're creating everything all the time. And most people assume that what they see is what's there, and what they believe is what's true. And this discussion, there are a lot of areas on the internet that go off into aphantasia and conscious. We can get to that, but there's actually a correlation piece with every single one of the Fetters, from the first one, and which I want to get into pretty fast, which is, where do we get our sense of self? Is it visual? Is it proprioceptive? Whatever. What are the components of our sense of self? And all of that. But just some general things. Almost everybody finds out they're aphants later in life. There's a guy on the internet who found out when he was 92.
Wow.
And it's because of what you guys say. It's just that we all think that the way we think is the way everybody else thinks. And we talk about the content of thought, but we rarely talk about how we think.
The experience of it, yeah.
Or the experience of thinking. So unless you're around people who are actually doing visual meditations or internal family systems or things like that, you may never know that you're an aphant. And it is interesting how people react to it and how late they find out about it, and the sense of loss and what's good about it and what isn't. And we'll start getting into that, because there are many things that are a pure gift about aphantasia. It's not a disorder. It's just the fact that we're all neurotypical, actually, but some of us neuroatypical, meaning that we're all different. We're all have a different mind's eye, ear, nose, whatever. And the fact is, you never know what another person's experience is, ever, ever, and never can. And so that's what the Fetter work and this work that Pernell and Todd are leading us into is about. The five senses aphants. I don't know how you feel about this, Marcus, but one interview I heard, he says, "I'm very much in the present. I can't imagine any sight, taste, touch, or smell. If it isn't there now, it doesn't exist. Everything is experienced as if for the first time." Do you feel that way?
I wish. No, I think I haven't as far as I can tell, broken through the first fetter yet. I imagine if I felt that way, if that was my experience, that sounds like I would be there. And I think it's interesting you talked about five. I think that for me, because I'm so, I don't know the word, I don't want to say stuck, but because the body senses are so alive for me, that is where it seems like the bulk of my selfing goes on.
Mm,
Stuff that almost everybody on the first Fetter work talks about, of just feeling like they're right here,
Mm.
and all these sensations. That's that is really powerful for me.
So yeah,
I
go ahead.
very much would echo that. The um how strong and significant the body sense is in identification. And for me, with the first fetter, what really helped was some pointing out instructions from Locke Kelly. And it was like a very physical exercise of you put your attention over in the corner and then bring your awareness back through your body to look for who's looking. And it was that sort of like physical switch that really was the key for me. So absolutely, I think the body is like really crucial for some of us in the identification.
So maybe I'll just say what the different aspects of the sense of self are. But there's the visual self, which is first person visual perspective. Body is seen as mine. It's a stable spatial anchor point from the visual sense that is learned. There's an auditory self, which is inner speech, called endophasia, auditory imagery, vivid versus this is actually created by a narrative that's going on all the time with yourself as the central character, and it's like narrating a story with you. There's the introceptive, which you're talking about, Marcus, which is the body self. I am this organism. So it's awareness of your heart, breath, gut, pain, tension, warmth, all of those introceptive things, which when they discovered that people with aphantasia have five sense aphantasia, they actually almost all still have introceptive sense.
mm,
So that's a different pathway than the later cortical divisions of the discovering this is a sight, this is a sound. This is closer to synesthesia. It's closer down on the brainstem. The introceptive awareness, it's learned really early in life. There's also the proprioceptive or spatial self, which is where you are in space, which is the 3D coordinate system of the self, which most aphants don't have a disturbance of. And then this is the really interesting one, is the conceptual or metacognitive self. I am the thinker, I'm the observer, it's the reflective self. So you see like yourself as, if you don't visualize the box top body, you think about yourself as a thing. And you're the outside perspective looking in on this entire conglomeration of the body, the voice, the viewpoint, the narrative, synchronized. And then you're the observer of that. And that's the metacognitive self. So maybe I don't know, Jason, I haven't heard your
yeah, yeah,
experience, but
yeah. I just have a question to
yeah,
you, Lila, about this because I know we talked about it yesterday that there's like that. If I am going into the kitchen, before I enter the kitchen, I have like an expectation of how the kitchen looks and how it's going to be. And if anything is different in there, I'm gonna get like startled about it because I have this inner image of where I am going in a moment. And that sense of a self is in my experience also part of that. That there's
that's
like
the
that.
proprioceptive spatial self.
Thank you. I just
So
needed that to
you're
be
orienting yourself in the maze of your life, like you're the rat going through and you know exactly where you're going
how it
and
looks when I get
yeah,
in
how
there.
it
Yeah.
looks when you,
Okay, thank you. I just needed that place. Thank you.
yeah. I just wanted to mention famous AFANs, just to know. Some famous AFANs is the guy who created Pixar,
Oh,
um,
no kidding.
Oliver Sacks. who talks about, he wrote a book called The Mind's Eye, but he talks about his aphant experience. He's really interesting, but he's written all this amazing stuff like about neurodivergence and things like that. A guy named Craig Ventner who came up with the structure of DNA. Darwin was an aphant. The founder of Facebook, many famous artists. I can't even go into it. One is like the Disney guy who is an animator who came up with a Little Mermaid, and he's one of their early animators. Herman Melville, a lot of famous writers are aphants. So it's really interesting. It runs in families. They say it can be trained. So you can train it if you're acquired. What are the things that lead to acquired aphantasia? It's like Jason was mentioning, head injury, stroke, PTSD, severe PTSD, depression, or some forms of psychosis, and also the autism spectrum. There are people who, like, I heard an interview with one woman who wrote a book, Do I Know You? Her name's Sadie Dingfelder. She's stereoblind or has prosopagnosia, which is not all prosopagnosia people are aphants, but all aphants should have prosopagnosia, which is the inability to recognize faces. It's really confined to faces. But she also had operation on her eyes when she was young, and she couldn't see, her 3D sense of space was gone. So she was seeing a flat world. And what's interesting is she trained herself through, like, those visual things that you guys, where she trained herself using VR and various things like that to learn to see depth, because it was acquired. But then when you get to Fetters 6, many people, when Fetters 6 drops, they get the flat screen. So that's really interesting to talk about, because in acquired aphantasia, you can train yourself out of it. In congenital aphantasia, you cannot. And that's, so far, is from what they can tell. But I think you can, because I think because almost all aphants have unconscious imagery going all the time, it's just a matter of becoming more conscious of your body and your subconscious flow. But anyway, that's another story. Let's see what else. Connection between imagery and emotion. That's another really interesting thing, is that all images are connected to emotion. And that whenever you have an image, you have an autonomic response, whether you know it or not. So one of the tests for aphantasia is you show them a movie, and if it's excited, they get high heart rate and their GSR. But if you take them into a room and say, imagine something scary, or you read a book and you try and evoke it, they get no pupillary constriction, no elevated heart rate, no GSR. So on the voluntary side, there's nothing happening whatsoever. On the actual seeing something, there is a reaction, because you're not evoking it yourself, you're being given it. So what do you guys have? Do you guys notice this in yourself? You're shaking your heads.
That was a lot of information, a lot of words that I have never heard before.
Okay,
Right.
ask me, Jason, what's confused
Well,
you?
I don't know. I can when I was listening to Marcus and Hannah describe their experience, I couldn't visualize anything in that. Like trying to compare my experience to their experience, there's just no connection at all. There was absolutely nothing. But thinking back to that conversation, I think that a big one was when the first fetter was seen through. There was a collapse of self. There was, and so before that there was a me and an other, and once that collapsed, there's just no boundary anymore, and so I think a lot of this comes from comparing where we are to something else, and when there's no longer something else, there's no longer any comparing. It all becomes one thing, and it's really hard to even articulate how to parse things out and grab things because things are just effortlessly flowing constantly. There's never any. It's always change, always, and it's hard to even picture to get a hold of something because something new's. It's always something new. One thing that I had been thinking of that I didn't say earlier was I play guitar, and I when I listen to music, I can hear the song, and even when I hear artists play, I I have already in my head projected where the music's supposed to go, and when I hear them go a different direction, I'm like, oh my gosh, that is such an interesting choice of notes. That is not at all where I thought this was going. So I can't really say where that comes from or what that looks like, but it's everything for me feels very kind of emotional. When I work with psychedelics, it's not so much that I get visuals. There's an emotional component that I know that I need to work through. When I all this work in the Fetters is not it's not ever a visual thing. It's an emotional thing. It's something that's sensed and felt and has to be felt to be experienced. And it's allowing myself the vulnerability to go into that space to feel that, have that experience, and then as soon as it's gone, like it's now going back and listening to Marcus and Hannah. It's like I don't even remember how that felt at the time. There's times like I can get a little bit of that. Looking at that picture you showed of the apple and the meat at the end where the slices, like sometimes I get little tidbits like just flashes of something, but I can't hold on to it. It's just as quick as it comes. It's gone. I might get a little bit of an apple something, but then it's gone. And I'm like trying to concentrate and really narrow my focus onto something. It's gone. So for whatever that's worth.
Maybe
I, I
Todd. Yeah, go ahead.
oh I was just gonna, if you have a question about what Jason said, maybe ask it. I there was something he said that I relate to, so I was gonna bring that up.
Go
Yeah,
ahead. Go
fine.
ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. Um, so this thing about the little flashes of the apple, and also Leela, what you said about training. Um, Earlier I said there was nuance to my, I don't see anything. Um, After a decade of meditation, um, to my surprise, I realized I do see images, and I saw this at first due to inquiry with the body
Yeah.
and the self. I was like, okay, there is something, and this is what reminded me when Jason said the flesh. There is something visual that is exists for a fraction of a second. It is as if it's the darkest possible gray on a black background. Like you can barely pick it out. Um, and like I said, it's a fraction of a second and it's that dim. And this isn't literal, but almost as if it's seen out of the corner of my eye, like that on the threshold between conscious and unconscious. So that's why it took me so long to realize that I was doing it. And I think a lot of people, even if they don't have aphantasia, get this with the body. It's not a fully fleshed in thing. It's almost like kind of a silhouette, just enough detail. But I realized it's actually pretty powerful in terms of selfing. And maybe all the more powerful, or at least hard to break through because it's so hard for me to focus on. Like I can't really examine it because it's gone. So this is like what Jason, it's like gone but that's there. And I don't think it's just with the body. I think it's as with people without aphantasia, it's overlaid on top of everything. So I'm not seeing the sofa. I'm seeing the caricature sofa, except my caricature lasts for a fraction of a second and is dark gray on a black background and all of that. Even more recently, and I'm less sure of this, but so with sounds, I do get little flashes of like a word here and there. It's
Mm.
rarely a complete sentence, but like a word, a little snatch of a lyric of a song. And I all of a sudden thought, you know what? I'm not hearing a lot of this. I'm mentally feeling the
Mm,
larynx and the mouth and the tongue
yeah.
forming,
That is so
almost,
fascinating.
yeah, almost as if instead of talking, I'm,
Yeah, yeah.
We
except
are
not even
all
doing
doing
that.
that.
It's just, so, but it's again so subtle that it's really hard for me to notice or detect. And I am wondering whether now that I have noticed it with more in another 10 years of meditation or whatever under my belt, whether I'll see there's actually more to it or it, comes more into consciousness.
Well, that was such a
That's
fascinating detail because it is like for those of us who do have internal voices, we are also making those micro
Mhm.
movements of the larynx, the jaw, and the tongue, and all of that. So it makes complete sense that
Mhm.
fascinating that you're still feeling that the interoceptive version of it, but without hearing the kind of auditory feedback that those of us, without anaurelia also hear. Um, I also had a follow up. I'm curious about so one of the things that I tend to talk about a lot is that for those of us who have mental imagery, in the mind, we often see a outline or like a mental representation of the face, the body in the current posture that it's in, the facial expressions, things like that. So I assume you don't have anything like that that's you're consciously aware of, but I'm wondering if as you're doing those, you know, really sitting and noticing the dark gray on black imagery, do you ever get any senses of the body map being represented in that kind of dark gray on black kind of way? Because when you say that a lot of the selfing is tied to that kind of very quick flash of imagery, because in people who have a internal visual world, a lot of the selfing is built on that mental map of a body as well. So I'm curious if you've ever noticed that that is something that you maybe catch sight of out of the, corner of your eye, so to speak, um, or if you haven't come across that yet.
When you say body map, do you mean like if I'm feeling the sensations in my hand, do I map that onto a visual image of hand?
Yes, and so that can be one thing, but like a lot of us just have like right now I'm sitting here talking to you and I can see the screen, everything is there, but also there's this kind of overlay of
Mm.
a thought in the back of the body in this particular of the face of the body in this. And it's almost like a way of knowing without having a screen in front of me showing it what my current facial expression looks like to other people from the outside. It's like an inner representation of what the externality might look like to them. And it's almost like a feedback loop of feeling the emotion that goes with what's being correlated in there. And I know for some people it's much more hazy and vague. For some people it's very, overt. But I'm wondering if you have like any glimmer of that sort of thing that might be happening underneath the surface.
I think boy, this is getting into like I can't, it's almost out of my grasp to even detect into it. But I something that I heard you talk about in one of your videos was like I'm not aware of exactly what you're talking about, but something that I'm becoming more aware of is this thing of when I look at something, there's like a bounce back
Mm,
to
yeah.
me. So I
Yeah.
have this relationship going, and I do think I have that. I really have to work hard to detect it, but I do think, yes, I look at you, and then there's a momentary, that really vague image
Yeah.
back at me, almost as if the mind is just going, wait a minute, where am I in relationship to you? Oh, good, I'm right here,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
How
I
about
guess one,
Hannah? Sorry. So yeah,
oh,
go on, Marcus.
yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to hog so much of the time. I
No,
just
No,
no,
no, no,
not at
to
you're
say
all.
that
Not
fine.
at all.
Okay.
the
It's
one other
fascinating.
thing that the one other thing that I've noticed is I tend to, I don't know how common this is for people without aphantasia, but I tend to be much more aware of myself from the waist up than from the waist down. And the visual image I have of myself, that vague one, it's like one of those Fisher Price toys where there's a head and a torso, but there are no
Thanks.
legs that I've
That's
noticed. Like they're
amazing.
just not, they're not included in the vague image.
Yeah, that's so interesting. You still have felt
Yeah.
senses in
Yeah.
your lower extremities.
Yeah, but I'm also not as like immediately when I go to my felt sense, it's almost always like here, and I have
Yeah.
to kind of work a little bit to go, oh yeah, I've got legs and feet. Yeah.
That's
It's so
fascinating.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just if I could just ask one quick follow-up on that, just because I'm so fascinated by this. So, like, if you were looking down at your legs and feet right now, and you can see them through your eyes, you can see the legs and the feet, and you can feel the corresponding sensations of the legs and the feet. The first kind of question is, are they does it seem to you that those internal sensations of the legs and feet are happening in the same sort of location as the visual aspect of your legs and feet? Do they seem to be mapped together?
Now that you say that, yes, but much more loosely than the chest, the
Okay.
feeling here. There's also much less of a sense of ownership of the
Mm.
waist down. Like this is me. Below the waist, it's like, oh, that's stuff. Someone's attached
Yeah.
to me. That's something.
Wow.
That's
And then
fascinating.
one quick little other follow. So if you did that again and you looked at your legs and your feet and you felt the sensations in the legs and the feet, and you get a sense for where it's all happening. And then as soon as you close your eyes, I'm curious what your experience is. How do those sensations change? Do they change? Are they still associated with the imagery that you were just seeing, or does it change character altogether and ownership or any of that?
That was really instructive. Um, when I close my eyes, it switches from what it does switch to what I see to a that dim visual representation of like
Okay.
two sticks.
Yeah,
That again is fleeting. It's but yeah,
that's
I
fantastic.
don't still I it's not like I see a photo of what my eyes just saw,
Yeah, but I
which is
would
to
love
say much very simplified and vague.
But I would love to have you do that then with your face, with the
Mhm.
feeling of the identity behind the face and also in the chest and torso. Because if you can do that, obviously you can't see your face, though maybe looking in a mirror might be an interesting exploration. But even to like look down at your chest and feel the sensations that are in the central channel of the chest and feel the sense of like ownership over that's there, or however that identity is being fabricated with the visual, and then close your eyes and see how that changes if you get that flash of
Yeah, same thing. It gets
yeah,
replaced. Yeah. And what that feels like to me is that when my eyes are open, I'm mostly experiencing that cartoon or vague thing
yeah.
anyway, more powerfully than what I'm seeing in a sense, in terms of selfing.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so it's so good to get aware
Yeah.
of that's going on, because that's exactly the thing that, somebody without aphantasia, I would point them to being very aware of that image and notice the disconnection between that and whatever it seems to be, that kind of primary self that it seems to be an image of or describing, to get that sense. Yours is even more removed because it's so abstracted, but
And it
obviously it's still
yeah.
playing a part.
And it's frustrating because I feel like everything I've just talked about, there's so much doubt about its veracity. I'm like, wait a minute, am I really seeing, because it's so vague? It's like, am I
Yeah, of
really
course.
seeing an image? So yeah.
Yeah. That's going to be really something interesting to explore.
Yeah.
I
Have
want to hear from
some
Hannah.
thoughts on the body sense. Sorry, my internet died and I dropped while we were talking about the body, but um because this was a huge breakthrough for me, and I'm trying to remember back to exactly how it felt, but it for the body sense, it was like like the mind was trying to hold this 3D model of where the senses should be. So it's not necessarily that I was seeing the model, but it's like the mind was trying to force different sensations to be in certain places. And then once I learned to just relax that, then there's not that body sense anymore. But for me, before I learned that, a lot of the instructions around, feel your foot or for whatever, it wasn't working because there was like my mind in the background was trying to hold the 3D model of, well, the foot should be down there. And then on top of that is the feeling of the foot. So it was almost like two layers of sensation. It's really hard to explain unless you actually feel it.
That's fascinating.
This is
Uh,
fascinating. What I love about this discussion, is that you, Todd and Pernilla, are very much relating the body and the bringing the body into this collapse of the first fetter. For many people, they think the first fetter is gone, but they retain the body location till much later on in the fetters.
Yeah.
So when I used to work with Rupert Spirax, for example, people like Francis Lucille would tell me, oh yeah, that body thing takes 7 or 10 years to go away, right? But people still think their fetter one has fallen, but they're still very firmly located in some, like your action figure, Marcus, that you have, or they have a very strong sense of internal location. And Todd and Pernilla, so you might want to ask some more questions, because really, honestly, this interoceptive or 3D space part of selfing is really the most thorny and hard to get through. I don't know what Jason's experience is either about that.
I don't know what my experience is either. Like I said, everything comes and goes.
yeah.
I think for the most part, most of the time, I have a sense of self. I see things in 3D. I think I experience um, what most people experience, but I also, all I have to do is focus attention, and the sense of self is gone, and I can focus, like right now looking at the screen. Everything right now is both 3D and 2D at the same time, and things just go in and out of focus, and um, it just depends on my focus. What am I focusing on? Um, and so yeah, it's living in two different worlds at the same time, and neither one of them is stable, and not in a bad way, but neither is before first fetter, and also as I've gotten deeper into further steps of further fetters falling, this has changed also too. So I'm trying to pull on memories of a few years ago, the way I experienced things, and I can't tell you that that's even accurate, because I realize how faulty memories are.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
I had the most amazing uh, eye-opening experience that happened just a few years ago, and it had to do with I'd gone to the dentist to get some work done, and they'd done a filling or something, and I came back home, and within just a week or two, I started experiencing pain again. So I called my dentist up, and I'm like, hey, I need to come in and see you again, because whatever you guys did, I'm experiencing some pain. So I go to the dentist office, and they're looking at my teeth, and they're like, yeah, you got something going on, whatever it was. And I said, yeah, it's the one that you worked on. And no, it wasn't even on the same side. It was on the other side. I would
Oh
have
wow.
bet everything I owned in my entire existence that it was the same tooth that they worked on just a couple of weeks ago. I was that confident that I remembered the events as they were, and I was completely off. It was something completely different, something I never even touched, except for probably just in the cleaning or whatever. But I was
Yeah.
so sure of that, and I'm was talking about this with a friend of mine yesterday. I'm still in awe that we allow eyewitness testimony in a courtroom.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
Yeah.
just the most mind-boggling thing when you realize how susceptible your memory is to decay or to you. It's like I like what Pernell says. It's what you experience is not what happened. What you experience is your perception of what happened, and
Yeah.
our perceptions are just all over the place. And just in this panel of what we have 6 people here, we all have different perceptions, and even those of us who have aphantasia, we have different levels of that or different experiences of that. It's just so mind-boggling. And so you really learn to hold everything very loosely, and that's where you just become humble in this. Like I don't know, I truly don't know anything at all, and you just allow things to be just as they are.
Yeah.
I love
I
that
love
so
that.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah, love that so much.
Yeah.
Would you guys be okay if we circle back to how it feels in the body? Because what Leela said, I'm really, really curious about how that is for you guys. Because what we do a lot in the first Fetter is to notice the difference between what what I think is real and what I think is in a certain way and what actually is. That is how we dissolve the sense of a self. And one of the exercises that I very often do is to ask people to close their eyes and feel their feet. And for people with that has the imagery in their mind, they notice that they are looking downwards with their eyes because they place their feet below their eyes. But they also have a feeling of something, and if they don't think more about it, um, they think that their feet feels feet shaped. But if you really feel into the notion of what you're actually feeling in your feet, it's not even feet shaped. And the more you dissolve the sense of a self, you also dissolve the experience of the feet or that sensation that probably is located in the feet to even be near the body. That can be completely dissolved. So it feels like there is no connection between that sensation and my feet. It's just a sensation arising in this open space that I'm floating in. And one foot is not necessarily next to the other foot or connected to my knees. It's again just sensations floating in space. But here's my question to you guys. What I experience when I do that is that I have imagery of like colored bubbles that are
Mm.
floating in space. I can imagine the room that I'm sitting in. I can also be in a black room, and it's just colored bubbles sensation that are floating, and I have no location of a me being here, and it's not, all the bubbles floating are not connected in a body or vessel in any way. It's just free floating bubbles in an open space. But I see that. So I'm curious to your experience of it. That when I ask you to close your eyes and feel your feet, what do you see? How do you experience that in your body?
What it feels like to me is that so at first there's a belief that that the physical sensations I'm feeling are feet shaped.
Hmm.
I, I I think that's just a thought. It's just a belief that they are. And then it's like, if you go into a program like Photoshop and you blur an image and you start with it almost sharp, and then you drag the little slider up so it gets more and more and more blurry. It's like that's the sensation loses its connection with a shape and gets more and
Yeah.
more like a lava lamp blob. Um,
Uh,
which even that's not right because that's talking about it visually, but that's like, I guess, the closest metaphor I can have. But there is initially that thing of, oh yeah, it's kind of a feet shape feeling. Um, it takes a little bit of time, 20 seconds or something for it to start lobbing. What I do find is that I have a very, very strong location sense
mm.
that so far I've not been able to break. So there is it may be blobby and not feet shaped, but it is down there.
Mm.
That I don't think I've ever gotten away from that I know of.
So what part of the brain is that?
Well, it's because you're also you. I assume what's happening is that you're when you have that strong location sense of the foot down there, there's a comparison happening because it's down there in comparison to some other part of the sensation
Yeah.
field that's being recognized. So there's
Yeah.
priority that's being placed either here or something like that. And then there's this relationship that's being created. So I'm curious, without the visual mental map going on, how it feels like those places are being oriented in space, which I think, is part of the proprioceptive sense. But to get that from the inside subjective experience of it, why the first question that comes to mind is why exactly these sensations by the face and the chest are weighted as more uh, prioritized and me centered than the sensations of the foot, that they are what the foot is being compared to, right? Like the foot isn't the location and the head and the chest sensations are happening up there someplace. Your starting point is located here, not down there. So putting a lot of attention in a way where you are so focused on feeling the sensations that are here as they are and taking in anything else. And this is what one of the things that really fascinates me and that I would love to hear more about. And I know we're not doing as much of that kind of talk today, but with people who are, in the aphantasia and rally spectrum, because I hear that there is like conceptual thinking and logic thinking and other types of thinking that kind of takes the place of the visuals and the auditory. I'm curious how that impacts this kind of practice. Like when you are sitting experiencing a feeling of presence or a feeling of prioritization of these sensations over those, what exactly it is in your experience, how that is being, fabricated, how that in sense of importance or priority is
Mm.
coming online. Do you have any sense of that?
The,
Any of
the
I,
you?
one,
I,
Yeah,
I know three of you, yeah.
yeah.
yeah. Hannah, do you want to, or Jason, do you want to?
Um, so similar to what Jason was saying, I do want to say that the experience now is probably different than it was years ago. So there's a part of me trying to balance what it is now and what I remember it being like before. But your question around sensations and why we prioritize sensations in this space, I think for me, a lot of it has to do with whatever sensations are strongest.
Mhm.
And for me, there was um, a lot of energy and sensations in sort of the back of my neck and the bottom of my head. And so the attention would often just go to that space, which would sort of reinforce this idea of that's where I'm viewing things from. And earlier, when we were doing that apple exercise, even though I couldn't smell the apple or taste the apple, I could feel all the sensations in my nose and my sinuses as if I were smelling something. It just didn't translate to a smell. And I could
Fascinating.
feel in my mouth, like, salivating. And I could imagine in my gums what it would feel like to bite into it. And so there's just so many sensations in that space that come up with sort of sensory conversations. And I think that is another reason why, at least for me, there was identification with this general space in the body.
That's so
Yeah,
fascinating.
it is.
I have like Hannah, some of it is has to do with intensity, that there's just more intensity of
Yeah.
sensation here. The other there are a couple of other things. One is that in the Fisher Price toy area of the body, it feels like there's a flow. It feels like this here and this here are connected, and there's sort of an energy that
Mm,
goes there. So it's like there's more for the mind to latch onto.
mm,
Whereas as soon as you say, um, feel into your feet, now what happens is there's a Fisher Price toy with feet, but there are no legs connecting the feet and the
oh,
Fisher Price toy, or feel into your hands, same thing. There are no arms. You'd have to specifically say feel into your arms. So there's no like
yeah.
flow sense of
Interesting.
connectedness. So I'm really aware of that. And then the rest of it seems to all be thought. It's just like I know the head bone's connected to the neck bone and the leg bone's connected to, like I just, the ideas come that, well, that's the feet are down there.
That is so interesting. I'm curious, just as a practice for you, if I know you've been meditating for 10 years, have you done many body scan meditations throughout that time?
For the past, so just a tiny bit of history here. Um, the tragedy for me when I look back was that it's clearly my body senses are the strongest ones.
Yeah,
Like a lot of people, I was totally disassociated from my
Mm.
body for most of my
yeah,
life. And it feels tragic to me because I couldn't compensate as much with
yeah.
the other senses. So I just feel like I lived in a really deprived world. Um, I discovered I was in talk therapy, which was not terribly effective for me. And my therapist said, let's do a 5 minute somatic meditation, which is basically what you're talking about, just at the
Yeah,
beginning to kind of get you
yeah.
centered. And I was like, it was so powerful. So
Wow.
we switched to doing it for 10 minutes. And by the end of my journey with therapy, it was 45 minutes of the hour session. I
That's
was
amazing.
doing a body meditation, and then just kind of to say we did it, we would talk for 15 minutes afterwards.
Yeah.
And then at some point on my therapist and I mutually agreed to let's terminate therapy. And I started working with a yoga teacher instead.
Nice.
So it's a long way of saying that for this has been like 3 years since then. And for the past 3 years, most of the meditation I do is dropping into the body. So
Excellent.
I do sort of open awareness, but it's very specifically like open body awareness.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's fantastic. I wonder if you, just as something to experiment with, if you do an intentional where you start where the sensation is the strongest and then move attention down lower and lower and lower and repeatedly build that bridge so that
Mm,
you're going down into the legs, down to the knees, down to the feet, out to the arms, out to the hands, to really reinforce that whole body map. If you're able to, with time, be able to strengthen those, because obviously the nerves are there. They're just not being registered as much for whatever reason. And I'm curious if you could re-sensitize those by creating kind of a bridge between where it's the strongest to where it's the weakest, and be able to maybe make those and see how that affects your ability to um, kind of embody all of the body
yeah.
and not just the Fisher Price half of it the most, and create that more cohesive map.
That sounds like a yeah, I don't do a lot of intentional stuff. I just do the
Yeah.
open stuff. The naive part of me wants to say, but was isn't that going to increase the sense of self?
Well, not necessarily. This is the thing where you're it's helpful to have the ability, like Jason was saying, to, have the body map just kind of float off or have there's no sense of body here. But it's also helpful to be able to know that, you're having tooth pain in one side of the mouth and that, and I say I know with Jason's it was more the memory, but that people can have that issue where if you completely lose the sense of the self creation or not the self, the body mapping altogether, it can be a real problem if you're having physical ailments. You need to go to the doctor and describe where something is. So there are practicalities where it's still perfectly useful and normal to have a full, complete sense of the body, but also it right now it's almost like it part of it. Part of the experience of having the body is being kind of shrouded in kind of obscurity, right? Like you're not able to actually accurately reach it, which means that it's not so much that you're seeing through the ability of that you're not identified with the body. It's more just that the body isn't fully available for you to be identified with. So I'm not saying it's like bypassing to not, feel your legs or something, but that it doesn't inherently make you more identified with it. That's a secondary kind of process that's
It's
happening.
exactly what I wanted to
Yeah.
add to it, that there's a huge difference between being able to feel the body, because you do have a body,
Yeah,
to
exactly.
feel the body and to feel your knees and feel your thighs and do that inner scan that Todd was talking about. There's a difference between that and then identifying with it, going like, and this is my thighs and this is my knees and they are, ugly or great or something. Like all that identification is a completely other level that we are talking about. Is And you don't need that add-on. This is more like to have that sense of self for the non-self, that self-care for the non-self, that you know where you are in space, that you can take care of the meat suit as good as possible, and describe what the experience is, without identifying with it in any way. It's like two different things.
Yeah. And in terms of all of the body therapy work and all of that stuff, the more awareness you have over where the tightness is or where the more you can direct your attention and your practice to meet those needs. So
Yeah, because
yeah,
we still have, like, one of the reasons why we're so invested in really taking the awakening experience into the body is that the body has been with you and has memories. The muscle have memories, and the fascial ligament and tendons have memories. And ever since you were created and your nervous system was created in the womb until you were about 25, when the brain was fully developed, you developed a body that had experiences in the body. And that is also what happens with CPTSD, that we have like complex trauma experiences where it's more like a syndrome of something, but that is not experienced in the mind, it's experienced in the body. But how it is experienced in the body affects our behavior and how we are in life and our personalities and all of that. So having that connection with the body is really important when it comes to awakening and comes to making sure that we are taking care of this meat suit the best possible way.
I would also add to that because as somebody who I haven't had, to the extremity quite that you're describing, Marcus, but I've always been kind of, living above the neck and really wasn't very much in the body either. Um, Getting to where, well, getting to where I could actually make contact with it, both in terms of, putting attention there and feeling the different parts of the body was very difficult at first, but useful, but also like physically, touching, moving, stroking, and feeling the sensation of that, and really being able to uh, have that sort of strengthen the connection of realizing, what is even there, and what it means to feel like, there is a body there that has been, calling out for some attention. That can be really powerful. So I highly recommend getting in touch with it, both in terms of the intentionally trying to feel internally your way through it, but also, use your hands, really engage the muscles and engage the skin, and get a full view of what it feels like, or a full felt sense of what it feels like, to kind of create that connection.
I would like to hear from
Yeah,
Hannah and Jason as
yeah, yeah,
well
yeah.
about how you guys experience this.
So I'll tie this back to something Leela said earlier, where the metacognitive piece, and this is something I wasn't aware of at the time, like years ago when I first started these explorations. But now that you said that, it's putting together a lot of pieces where early on, I really did have this sense of self that was like the metacognitive. I'm the one watching my thoughts, or similar with what I said earlier with these like 3D sort of body structures. Like I was the one who was aware of like my body trying, or mind trying to hold this certain shape that meant the foot was below me.
Hmm.
And um so one thing that really helped me with that, going back to body scans, is when I would first do body scans, it felt like this sort of metacognitive me was right, like watching this 3D structure, but not with my eyes. It's so hard to explain, but it felt like I was aware of this 3D structure, and then I'm trying to now move my mind to the foot in my 3D structure. Like it very much felt like there was a version of me that was trying to navigate this. And
Hmm.
so basically just relaxation, like really, really relaxing and relaxing that function, and seeing that, like, if I listened to the meditation and it said, okay, feel your feet, starting to see I don't actually have to do anything. The sensations will just appear in my foot on their own in response to the directions. And so that helped with, I don't know, short circuiting that sort of super metacognitive position that was watching all of these things happen. And then it slowly just became, I don't know, just it's a soup of sensations now, where I do, like Marcus was saying, I feel sort of like an energy channel, but sensations from the rest of my body are sort of all mixed into it as just like this cloud of sensations.
So interesting.
So the exercise of the feet, you know, you just you know where your feet are because we've been in our bodies all of our lifetime. So I know where to direct my attention. But if I direct my attention to that, like I'm doing right now, there's no visual image of feet. And I like what Marcus said was like it's kind of like it feels pixelated. Like the more you zoom in on it, the more it pixelates and becomes all the edges are gone. Like at first, I can say I feel pressure at the bottom of my feet, but if I really focus on that, I just feel something. I can't even describe that as pressure, nor can I describe that as at the bottom of my foot. And if I stay with that sensation, I can't find an edge to it. I can also feel at the same time the pressure or the sensation of my butt in this seat and my back on this seat and the ambient temperature of the room. But those are all happening simultaneously, and I can't find where one starts and the other one ends. They're all one experience, and I have to focus on certain sensations to be able to pick out what's what. And those are all mind coming in after the fact, labeling this is the foot, this is the chair, this is, but those are all happening after the fact. And it's, I think that for most people, this is just my what I think. I think for most people is that those come at the same time, or they feel like they come at the same time. And it happens so fast that we don't see the label. We don't recognize the label that's coming from the mind, the brain, wherever it's coming from, that says that's pressure on the bottom of my foot. But if you can just stay in the pocket of the sensation as it is, where is that? And it's not locatable. It's not locatable. And there's also nothing that's outside of it as well. So it's so hard to describe, but it's every, I think most people have the exact sensation, or the exact type of sensation. It's just the overlay of the mind on the sensation that's dicing things up into things that we can wrap our minds around. But again, it's just for me, my own personal experience. When I just drop into that again, I'm going to drop right now back into the sensation of the feet. It's just the totality of everything happening right now. And there's just not, everything comes after. All the labels come after the sensation. But those are all just the mind adding labels to what is, which I can't describe what is. I can tell you what the mind wants to label it as, but that's not what is, right? It's
Yeah.
it's
Can
something completely different.
I want to say something to what Jason's saying, and also what you said, Pradilla. You talk about pinning and unpinning.
Yeah.
And bringing this back to aphantasia, the thing that Jason's talking about, the second layer where the mind comes in and says, "This is my foot; it's located here." All of that, that pinning and unpinning, that gets addressed further on in the fetters. Often, it's not always in the first fetter, but the identification, like Marcus, she was saying, all those body senses, there's no problem with that. I mean, they're part of experience. It's the fact that you are the body and you are the little action toy from here to here. And that has to do with two aspects of aphantasia, which I find fascinating. One is memory. So the autobiographical memory, people say that in aphantasia, there's a lot of people with what's called SDAM, which is severely deficient autobiographical memory. Because they can't, they don't have the flow of images and stories going on. They don't, some people say things like, I'm reading a book with disappearing ink, or like there's some concept of your past, but it isn't the arrow of time that most of us have, where we can just see the movie screen progressing from past to future. And another guy said, it feels like when I'm reading my diary, I feel like I'm reading someone else's diary. And I know that with more Fetter work that I've done, I have that also. I just do not relate to anything anymore, past and future. And what's so fascinating is neurologically, if you imagine a normal, not aphant, imagines doing something in the past that happened. Let's say you had your father hit you, and you feel this, you have the emotion with it. Your body does the whole thing that it did the first time around, and that's the exact same thing as if you imagine that your father is going to hit you. So there's no difference between what happens in the brain between past imagination and future projection, which is fascinating, because that whole arrow of linear time, and therefore the story of me and identification of me, In many aphants, it's not there. And with that comes something called, and it's some form of anhedonia. They don't have, also because they don't have this whole story, they don't have all the emotion attached to, oh, poor me, this is what happened to me, and I'm going to now predict that this is going to happen in the future. So a lot of aphants describe this whole thing of feeling emotionally blunted. Some people call them cold, but they also don't suffer as much because they're not repeating the same thing over and over and over and over that was traumatic, or they're not imagining that that's going to happen in the future. So I wanted you guys to talk about your experience of memory and autobiographical memory, because to me, that's one of the gifts of aphantasia. That's like, that's a great thing. You know, we work very hard to not to unpin from that. But
Yeah.
anyway, that's, I wanted to bring that
Could
up.
we add rumination to that as
Yeah.
well?
Yeah,
Because I'm
rumination
super
are the
curious about
circles,
rumination.
the loops
Yeah, I'm
that you
super
get.
curious about that too. So yeah. Yeah, what do you guys say?
Well,
I can start, and because I was thinking about this yesterday in psychedelics. You know, we know from science that I can't remember what part of the brain, but the default mode network goes offline during a psychedelic experience, and the default mode network is what is responsible for memory. Okay, so when that gets disrupted, there's the timeline gets broken, and I describe that as the inside becomes the outside, and the outside becomes the inside. There is no me and the me and this. It's just this, and there can still be a sense of me, but it's also seen that the me is this, and there can be a past. I think that is so crucial in the awakening process that you break through the first fetter. That it is such a change in the way that you experience yourself, and the way that you experience other, because there is a there's a direct correlation of this versus that all through life, and when that first fetter drops, that's seen completely through, and you're still going to have, you may still have a sense of self, especially for a while, and even now, even years later, I still have a sense of self, but it's seen through as that's just a thought after the fact. I'm putting together things, memories of a past life, and putting things in chronological order as to how I ended up here because of X, Y, and Z happening. And in the relative, absolutely, X happened, then Y happened. It's a chain of events that led me and you and everybody that's watching this to be here today. A chain of events. But where did that chain of events come from? And there's, you can't get to a place where that happened from somewhere. There is no somewhere for something to happen. There was no time for something to happen. There's only right now, and it seems so clearly and so completely that even though the thought of a past, or the thought of the image of what I'm going to do when this call's done, or what is going to happen a year from now, those are just seem to be thoughts, and they have no place to grab onto. There is nothing to grab onto anymore, and I completely understand that this can be really destabilizing, and I'm sure that, and I know for me for a while it was very destabilizing, but it takes a while to work through the layers of, and this is all about a grieving process. We think that life is a certain way, and we find out as we go through life that it is not the way that we think it is, and there's a process of grief that we have to go through, as we let go of those things, as those things melt away, as they come unglued from us, right? This programming that we were born with. And as you work through those and allow the grief to happen, the anger that you experience, the guilt, the shame that you experience throughout your life for the choices that you thought that you made, that you now see you had no choice, you were pre-programmed, you were just the product of your environment, right? You don't have any choice in that. And there's no you at the center of that now. You spend, before the first fetter breaks, or falls away, rather, there's a sense of me. I'm responsible for everything that happens. I have a sense of being able to control things. I should have known better. I should have. I. And once that's seen through, that there is no I at the center of it, you realize that this is a process of X leads to Y, which leads to Z. It is a things unfolding, but there is no person at the center of that. There is no anchoring point to that. And so you can you can see that, you can experience that, you can feel that. It comes from different ways, but it becomes very fluid, I think. And even now, I can, my 12-year-old, take the trash out, and I get some lip from him about, oh, Dad, I don't want to do it, and I can feel the anger build up, and it's just like, so it's not that I don't experience emotion, it's that I'm not holding on to that, right? In this thing of memory is us holding on to a perceived past. We can be so bound up in our belief that things should have been a certain way, that people should respond a certain way, and we hold that so tightly, and that's the sticking point. But who is that happening to? When that's gone, there's nothing for that to stick to anymore. And those emotions of anger or guilt or shame may come up momentarily, but then who's that who's that who's that involving? There's nothing at the center, and it just kind of flows effortlessly. And what the the anger or whatever you might experience, what may have lasted hours, weeks, even years, something you held on to, now it just comes up, and within seconds, minutes, it's gone again. You experience it, and so all that the hinge to that keeps all that connected is this sense of a separate person moving through the world that is the that's apart from everything that is, right? Me against everything else. And when that me drops away, it's not against, it's what is. It's learning to really embody the flow of life as it is, without holding expectation, without holding a memory of the way things were, or an expectation of the way things should be. That's memory for me. It's kind of, there's something there. I can look back on pictures of the kids growing up, and it's but it was like another person, another lifetime, another something. But it's not, when I look at who I am, that's not who I am. That's something else. Who I am is what is right now. And even that, I can't say what that is. I can't say who I am, what I am. And I don't need to, because I realize it's just this here. And how beautiful is that? And it just allows you to be free.
Thank you.
Love
I
that.
just have a little bracket that I just want to say, and it has nothing to do with aphantasia, anything. It was just a thing that I caught on that you said, that when you when you say that your teenager, gives you lip, that you feel anger about it. I would like for you to explore that, because that is what I call, like, a delayed trauma response. because the only way you can react to a teenager giving you lip about taking the trash out is laughter. There's nothing more about it. Oh yeah, right. So you think that is, it's just like there's nothing in it. So if there's that contraction, explore how that feels in the body and see what the connection is, because you might not be aware that there's a memory sitting and not even like a visual memory, but there's like a contraction that is happening. Breathe into that, see if you can like shake it out or stomp it out or yell it out, or but get in contact with it and see what happens next time you get lip, because there's no connection between a teenager giving lip and you feeling anger, because it is hilarious. Teenagers are hilarious the way that they are so entitled, and it is hilarious. It's really, really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I do have a very strong autobiographical memory. This won't be a surprise after everything I've said here, but it's so tactile and body sense centric. I was thinking this morning about a particular weekend when I was like 5, when I was having having kind of a cuddly morning in bed with my dad, and I can call up the feeling of his stubble like I'm feeling it right now. I can't see him and I can't hear his voice, but like the bed feeling of the bed sheets and everything. Um, and unpleasant memories are similar. Like I can feel back to being a really young kid at the dentist, um, and the all the the painful and feelings of that, but also like the kind of plasticky feeling of the or whatever that was of the dentist chair and
Yeah.
everything. So that's where I think how my autobiographical memory is. And when I ruminate or think of project into the future, when I have fears about the future, they're often about what if such and such happens and I feel a pain, it's painful in the
Yeah.
body.
Yeah.
And then I can feel like a little visual premonition of what that pain would be like, which I'm sure I'm remembering back to previous pain sensations to
Yeah.
build that projection.
Can I just ask quick? So I'm curious because all of the things that you have mentioned are, things obviously that are physically close to in contact with the body. Do you have abilities to remember events like, the like yeah, I don't know, your teacher talking to you or interaction with a friend or something that has representations of something outside that's not in contact with the body?
Yeah, very much so, but I think I anchor it in the body. So in other words, it's like I remember when my teacher was giving me that lecture and I and I may remember what the lecture was about, but what's also happening, remember at the same time is I'm remembering how it felt in the body to be lectured that way, and also like what the seat I was sitting in felt like.
Yeah.
I also find that I project into other people. Like I have a really strong memory of a friend of mine, at a very young age, whose mother had told him not to get his new shoes wet, defiantly jumping into a puddle. And
Yeah.
in when I think back on that memory, I'm feeling jumping in the puddle, even though it wasn't me.
It wasn't you. Yeah.
Yeah, but I can feel it in my body. Yeah.
That is fascinating.
That is so cool. Yeah, it's so interesting.
I wanted to go back to something Leela said around memory and not having very good memory of sort of tracking, day by day. And one, that is my experience, definitely. And what is interesting now in hindsight is I can see that as like a child and, a teenager and into my early 20s, I developed this really intense hypervigilance and anxiety around this because my sort of default was if I can't remember something, I must have made a mistake. It must have been something shameful. I must have done something wrong. It must have been something embarrassing. And so I had this, yeah, just like hypervigilance. It probably that sort of metacognitive thing we were talking about earlier of I I can't remember exactly what I said in that conversation yesterday. I must have said something embarrassing and wrong, and so I would just have such intense anxiety around it. And um, that was like seeing through all of that was really important to me in sort of the unraveling of the fetters. I would say building on what Marcus was talking about with memories, um, I have very few sort of autobiographical memories. That was always the case, but then through awakening, even more fell away because for me, the memories were mostly physical things, but not to the detail that you are describing, Marcus. It would more be like um, if my parents did something that made me upset, I would remember that feeling of in my body of being upset. And then, in the future, that same feeling would be triggered. And so I would be able to remember, oh, yeah, my parents made me upset, but I had no memory of what actually was it that happened that made me upset? Like, what was the context? What did they say? What did they look like? There wouldn't really be any of that. It was just like this physical sense of like, oh, I was upset. And the other piece of this, which is where I think the hypervigilance ties in too, is going through this process, also recognizing that because I have so few memories, the memories that I did sort of retain were always the things that felt negative. Like that would be the moment when the mind would come in and be like, oh, that felt shameful, that felt embarrassing or scary or whatever it was. And so the only sort of like memories I really strongly had of connecting my past were all the sort of like negative or traumatic or upsetting things. And like I obviously know, right? Like, I know I got married and it was a beautiful day. This was a long time ago. I'm just using it as an example, right? Or I know I had this wonderful moment with my kids, but I actually can't like recall those memories. Like my mind just when I'm really present and in a happy moment, it's like it's not recording, and the recording would only come on in things that felt threatening.
Which is great for survival. I mean, it is what makes the species survive. That if we are all like um, thinking that the what is lying, in the bushes is a rope, we would
Yeah.
not have made it to here.
Yeah.
So it is a bit like that expecting everything to be a snake is making sure that you survive.
I'm super curious to follow up though, but really kind of on all of you. But so like Hannah, you kind of I think explained a little bit more of it. But it's like even in the strong memories where like, you said you remember being yelled at by a parent or positive memories like Marcus, being with your father or being with a friend or something like that. Like I can imagine having the sort of haptic felt sense in the body that's there when you are recalling one of these memories. But I'm curious what it is like because we kind of gloss over when like Marcus when you say like you have a memory about your friend getting yelled at by his mom when he was jumping in the puddles and in his shoes. That's a lot of information that is specifically not being conveyed just by the feeling in you of even jumping in the how and I know this is probably where we kind of transcend the point of being able to really describe it, but I'm curious like what that knowingness of that information is like for you without having any sort of reference point of
Yeah.
visuals or trying to put it into a context.
I, so I don't know how much I've been biased by Buddhism, but I really buy into the idea that we just have those six senses.
Yeah.
Mm.
So even when I have that classic aphantasia description of I just know things, I do a lot of inquiry around, but what does that mean? I
Yeah,
can't
Yeah,
that's what
know
yeah,
things.
fascinates me.
yeah,
It has to be visual or tactile, or it's got to
Yeah.
be a real sense. So um, I think when I'm telling you and recalling that, oh, this friend jumped in the puddle, all this, what can be filled in with body senses is definitely filled in with body senses.
Yeah.
Um, the rest of it, I think, maybe not all of it, but I think a big chunk of what's left, like kind of the story part of it, well, his mom said this and so on,
Yeah.
I think is that very subtle, for me, auditory, if we want to call it that, of there are sentences describing it, but I'm not hearing them.
Okay.
It's very subtly feeling the sentences form in the mouth, and so
Yeah.
that's what I'm experiencing. That's is partially me hypothesizing what's
Yeah.
going on because it's
So
so
interesting.
vague. It's
It's
so
like
vague. But yeah.
it's like hearing you guys talk about it. For me, it's like an itch that you can't scratch because
Yeah.
like I'm so
Yeah.
trying to conceptualize or get a feel for how that is, because exactly as you say, and that's why I say all the time, we just have these senses, and I have, yet to really find anything that isn't represented in one of those. And obviously for me, it's very clearly, if I remember a time of something, I'm really seeing and hearing, and it's kind of like being there. So the idea that you can know and remember and convey all of this information without having any image
Mhm.
or sound or something to convey it is just like mind blowing to me. And it's so I'm so like trying to get a grasp of how that is done. So thank you
Todd, I
for.
want to speak to that because a common thing that AFANTs say is I feel like I know, but I
mm,
can't
Yeah.
grab at the sight or the sound like Marcus is saying. And I think they're discovering now, because it's a spectrum, like how do you recall a dream? How do you recall a dream? You feel the dream when you wake up. It's happening all the time, regardless of whether the frontal cortex is actually recording it consciously or not. It's still going on in our waking life, in our hypnagogia, in our psychedelics, in our lucid dreams. These things are happening, and AFANs actually have the same apparatus that we do. They're lacking the network connection that develops later that they can voluntarily pull it up into consciousness and make it a thing. You
That
see,
makes
and
sense.
that's why they're
Yeah.
saying that all AFANs have visual information in their visual cortex. They're just not aware of it. And that's what I find so fascinating, is actually the reason it's a spectrum and the reason why people can't put language to how they recall. It's like in the dream world. How do you recall that if you don't see a picture? Well, part
Yeah.
of you is seeing the picture. Part of you is actually seeing the picture. It's just not the part that's awake and aware of it right now.
Yeah.
You know what
That
I'm
makes sense.
saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question about that for the non-aphantasics. If I ask you to recall a piece of information that you just know, like you know the back of your hand, like how old are you? One of these things that's going to instantly pop to mind. Is there an obvious sensory, like do you hear, 48, or do you hear the words or something, or do you see numbers floating in air, or
I literally hear it and actually
I
see the
see. Me
numbers.
too. Yeah,
Yeah.
wow.
yeah. I see.
Yeah.
I see my age, my birth year, and I hear both.
But
But
I
it's
can
interesting.
speak,
Yeah.
for
Sorry, go
me,
ahead. No,
it's
no.
stuff
Yeah.
that I know that has no picture and no sound and no visceral memory. There's just, and that's the type of knowing that we never lose. Do you know what I'm saying? That like you just know it. And you could call it intuition, but it's even deeper than that. It's like it's embedded in the body in a way that's just like you are just so sure of it. And there's nothing that is going to change it. Even if someone put a pink elephant in the middle of the room, you would still know, you know what you know. You never unknow what you know. And that's a lot of what in the way of awakening that has on my quote path, if there is a path, those minutes where that information came through as knowing with no sight, no sound, no anything, just the sensation of it comes through as like maybe a third eye penetration, something where you just know. That's always been very profound and very deep and very permanent. So I think we all have that mechanism where we just know things sometimes with no pictures or sounds.
Mm.
Is that what you're pointing to, Marcus?
Yeah, that's
Because
what I was asking about. I was the part of me that wants to make a connection to other people was hoping Todd would go, "Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Yeah, I don't get an image or a sound. I just know my
Yeah.
age," but it didn't work out that way.
No, well, but that's the thing. Like, I'm trying to think of something that I can say that I know without having it being represented in some way. And I'm not sure that the representations are necessary to feel like I know it, but they come along with it so immediately that I can't say that they're not. They tag right with it. I mean, if you ask like, yeah, I don't know, the shape of the earth or whatever, it's like an image comes up as well as there's the semantic knowledge that I have learned that, the earth is round and that, there are four seasons and that 4 + 4 = 8 and things like that, which are recallable as like learned facts. But as I recount them or if I'm asked them, I'm also seeing literally
mm,
4 + 4 = 8. And I'm literally seeing an image of the earth. And so those come with it. And, if I suffered brain damage that made it so I couldn't see those images anymore, I'm sure that I would still know those things. And I just don't know how, because I think that is probably like, I'm not I guess what it was, it doesn't feel like I'm consulting the image to know that the earth is round. That does feel like it's something that comes before that, but the two are just so inextricably linked that they happen at the same time. So I think I get a sense of if that, the visual cortex wasn't creating, or stimulating an internal representation um, of the earth, I would still know the fact that I have learned that the earth is round. Um, but at this point, there's basically like, I'm still struggling to think of something that I could answer that doesn't have some sort of representation that
Yeah,
just immediately comes along
yeah,
with it.
I don't have, it's like the difference between a radio and a TV, that the sound and the image is just there with on a TV, and on a radio, it's just the sound. It's a bit like that it's not that I know that the earth is round because I'm seeing the image of it, or with 4 + 4 = 8. It's all a part of it happening at the same time, just like on a TV screen, where the sound and images happening at the same time, and that visceral experience of it, and then I have all the synesthesia on top of it with the colors and all of that.
I'm sort of talking about, like, I had this experience that I was walking into the operating room one day and I saw a bee in a flower. And all of a sudden, I knew that I know nothing because the intelligence of that bee in the flower is more than any doctor or any human knowledge could ever predict or know. So what I know about that is the story. When I tell the story of that realization, there's the whole story that goes with it that has the auditory and the whatever, but the knowing itself has nothing associated with it, right? The fact
Mhm.
when you, and people tell their awakening stories like that. There's like, here I was getting a drink of water and all of a sudden myself fell away, right? But the self falling away is a knowing that's way deeper than any picture or anything, but we always contextualize it,
Mm.
especially for non-aphants in the whole, and then it becomes something that happened in time that is related to me, which is the whole problem with it because it didn't happen in time and it's not related to me. But it is a very thorny area with teaching awakening, listening to stories about awakening, develop expectations about awakening, because everybody tells their story conditioned in memory in the arrow of time. But really, any of the real knowing is vertical. It's not
Mm.
there. it's ever present and always there. And it's somehow a little aperture opens up and without the horizontal memory of it. Do you see what I'm saying? And so I don't know how that works in the brain yet. But I do know that it isn't temporal and it's not personal. So anyway, but otherwise, like Todd and Pernilla are saying, if you ask me if the earth is round, something, conceptual would arise, but it would have a picture with it. I would see a globe. I just, but that again is overlaid, but it's the concept or something is first, or I don't know.
Are you guys up for us continuing another day because we have literally 3 pages of questions for you guys about this, how the experience is.
Yeah, because the metacognition and all these other aspects.
There's so many things, and you guys have said so many things. I can also feel I need to digest what you have said, because every single thing you have said had popped up 7 questions each. I have so many things to ask you guys. I'm so fascinated by this. It's really, and I'm grateful to you for doing this.
Yeah, can I just say, I'm really grateful for you for doing this and hosting this. Like Jason, I was in IFS therapy, and this is nothing particular about IFS, but the world of therapy tends to be very frustrating for people with aphantasia. I've seen countless diatribes about this online because therapists are trained often to work people through visualizations, sometimes work them through using inner voice to do things. I one time bought a book called Somatic IFS, and I thought this is the book for me, but it was all like imagine a flame burning in your stomach and all this kinds of stuff. And in the non-dual world too, I think there are unique challenges for people with this kind of neurodiversity, just like there are with autism. And I don't know anybody else who's really addressing this other than you folks in this. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we appreciate all of the input too, because, it's something that I'm trying to be more and more aware of as I'm currently editing, just finishing up a book and, in making inquiries and stuff. Yeah. Because I tend to rely so much on that too, because it's my experience. And so the more input I get from how other people, process and experience, the more it helps me to create things that are inclusive to everyone and that can hopefully reach people, that work for them. Because, like we know, obviously everybody doesn't experience things the same way. So the more input we have, the better we can do our job too. So we appreciate you guys being here and sharing your experiences with everybody.
Yeah, I really think that a panel like this is so important for all the people out there that, first of all, don't know that they have aphantasia or an Aurelia. They don't know about that. But also for all the rest of us, just to get that reminder that what I perceive as reality is not reality, it's just my perception. What I think is real is just a bloody thought. And it just puts us in a position of being humble to what other people bring to the table of their experience. That if somebody gets angry at me for something I said, it cannot have anything to do with me. It's about their perception of it. And I can have compassion and kindness to their perception of it. But to know that, we need to hear and experience panels like this from people that experience the world completely different than the way we experience it. So I'm really, really grateful for you guys doing this. And I'm really looking forward to many, many more panels to come where we can talk about it. And I also want to say, if you have been sitting and listening to this and you have questions to the panel, to Jason, Marcus, or Hannah, or any questions to Leela, Todd, and I, please write in the comment section. We would love to bring your questions into the panel so we can talk about it and dive deeper into the experience of it, of what it means to live a life with aphantasia and Aurelia. And how an awakening path looks
Mhm.
when you view the world completely different than all our normies.
Yeah. And likewise, if you are watching this and you also have aphantasia or aneuralia or something, and you are on the awakening path and you would like to join in with a future panel, please also let us know. It's great to get, as many viewpoints as possible.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, you guys, for coming.
And thank you, Leela, for organizing
arranging
this and
all of
putting everything
this.
together,
Nothing
doing the
would-
research, and thank you for doing all of this.
Yeah. So thank you so much, you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Looking forward to talking again.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We have created a course of our first Fetter material. This course will walk you step by step through all of the ways in which identification is created and selfing happens. If you've been struggling to see through the self structure or have that first awakening shift, this course contains hundreds of tools to help you discover the selfing mechanisms when they're happening, and then see through the illusion of identification that are created. Along with over 14 hours of videos, this $49 course contains a full book worth of summaries, extrapolations on the videos, written inquiry suggestions, and other text. So work slowly, leave time for integration. This is powerful material and it can be life-changing.